Now there was the real danger a few years ago when Range Rover introduced the Velar, in that it would be something of a difficult middle child, sitting above the Range Rover Evoque but below the Range Rover Sport. But actually the British brand did a really commendable job of creating something that's its most road-biased product to date. In fact, the Velar is about as close as we'll ever get to the fabled Road Rover. But for this year, there's some substantial changes going on beneath that sleek bodywork, namely this one being a plug-in hybrid. Just like any Range Rover product, it's dressed in a smart suit. Crisp, clear, highly polished, clearly a premium thing to look at. I mean, this Range Rover features the most rakish body shape in the lineup, with that tapering roofline and slightly angled profile. However, things like a really prominent beltline and exaggerated wheel arches highlight this as a 4x4 and not some have-a-go hero SUV. It's crisp and modern, something that is perhaps best embodied by the door handles that fold in flush to clean up the silhouette of the car when it's parked up. To the untrained eye, this Velar looks just like any other Velar in the range, and that's perhaps how Velar owners want it. It being a plug-in hybrid is more of a convenience, an added bonus. They're here for the Range Rover package.
That Range Rover polish is present and correct inside too, with lavish leathers and glossy finishes. There's the odd, questionable material choice, but generally the cabin feels like an expensive place to be. The focal point is the 12-inch Pivi Pro infotainment system that handles everything from radio to navigation, but also plays nice with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Another nice touch is that you can pair two phones simultaneously, giving passengers the power of the playlist. There's a second screen that's full of rich graphics and absorbs much of the Velar's switchgear. It looks great, but it's maybe not the easiest thing to use on the move, and there's a slight ergonomic flaw with the new gear selector partially obscuring the driver's temperature dial. Rear passengers are treated to the same lovely upholstery, although legroom is not the most spacious in this class. However, headroom is commendable. Boot space is a great 625 litres, and that is ample for everyday life. However, it is a reduction on non-plug-in models.
Right, that's enough of the niceties when it comes to the plug-in Velar. Let's get to the pistons and the battery of the subject. Under the bonnet you'll find a 2-litre 4-cylinder petrol engine. It's part of the Enginege range from JLR that you'll find in other vehicles, but in this case it's backed up by a 17.1 kilowatt-hour battery.
Combined, that will net you 398 brake horsepower and 640 newton meters of torque.
I mean, yeah, it's fair to say that this thing's got legs. 0 to 62 miles per hour in 5.4 seconds, and it'll go on to a top speed of 130 miles per hour, which certainly isn't bad for your luxurious family runabout, is it? And a lot of that comes courtesy to this hybrid powertrain that it's got on board. Thanks to the immediate on-off nature of the EV side of this powertrain, something that equates to about 100 horsepower all in all, it means that the response is really immediate when you do decide to put your foot down. The torque comes in really quickly, it's an instant response from the electrical side of things, and whilst it's not snap your neck fast, it torque fills really nicely until the engine kicks in, comes on song, and you have actually what is a pretty rapid thing. Let's not forget, it's just shy of 400 brake horsepower, this car. Now, as I said, this is Range Rover's most road-biased vehicle, and you can feel that right from the get-go. In comparison to most other Range Rovers, you sit a lot lower in the chassis, you feel much more plugged in, and the steering and just the feedback from the chassis feels a bit more intuitive. You're a bit less distanced from what's going on beneath you. The Range Rover Velar in all of its guises has a really nice flowing feeling as you go down the road, particularly on undulating tarmac. It feels like it's got plenty of grip, it's very self-assured, and the responsive steering gives it a good sense of agility. Combine that with all-weather, all-wheel drive traction and good body control, and you actually have probably one of the tidiest handling Range Rovers this side of a Range Rover Sport.
But whilst it's fair to say that it's dynamically competent, it's not necessarily the most engaging SUV in this class.
Now, whilst this car does mimic the behaviour of its conventionally powered stablemates, you do feel the added weight of the batteries on board. Not only does it cut into a bit of boot space, but just under braking and as you turn in, you just feel there's a bit more inertia at play. It's not anything that kills the drive at all, it's just whenever you're dialed up in dynamic and maybe hitting some more twisting roads, it's something that you might pick up on. But for the day-to-day, actually, it does pretty well. I mean, it's at a slight disadvantage in that plug-in hybrid models also can't have air suspension, which maybe gives you a slightly better ride. I think the large alloy wheels on this vehicle don't help necessarily. The ride is good in general, but obviously you get a bit more freedom and added ride height whenever it comes to air suspension. All in all, this Range Rover behaves, well, just like how you expect a Range Rover to behave. It's very quiet, it's very opulent. You do feel like this is something of a citadel of luxury as you view the world as it's laid out before you in front of the windscreen. It's a lovely place to spend time, and something that is amplified by the fact that you've got 33 miles of all-electric range. Now, this car has 3 selectable drive modes. Right now we're in hybrid, which means it's using a combination of the battery and the combustion engine to get maximum efficiency. When you're driving hard, it will do things like torque fill and use that electrical energy to fill in the torque gap as the turbocharged engine picks up. But generally it will flit in and out based upon speed and all the other inputs that it's measuring. It's really impressive how it flits between combustion and electric quite imperceptibly. Some vehicles, it's really noticeable when the engine kicks in and kicks out, but this drivetrain is impressively smooth. Now, if I go down here, I can actually put the vehicle in EV mode. And as I said, that gets you up to 33 miles of purely electric range. And if you think where this car is going to spend most of its time, it's going to be in quite an urban environment, maybe doing a commute or two. 33 miles is actually pretty good. That might be enough to get you to work and back, certainly enough to drop the kids to school and return home. So you might not be seeing a fuel filling station anytime soon in the Velar. Of course, electric running has its environmental benefits, but it also adds to the civility in the cabin. There's something really nice about slinking your way through the urban sprawl, totally silently, guilt-free, and it sort of settles you down to this really nice, calming environment in the cabin without the hum of an engine continuously in the background. It sounds silly, but actually that background noise probably contributes to a reasonable amount of fatigue on our day-to-day journeys. The third option on this really visually attractive screen down here is save. Now what that does is it can maintain the level of battery that you've got currently. So let's say you're tootling through town, you're about to join the motorway, and what you want is to save some battery when you get to the built-up destination at the other end. So you can join the motorway, the car will still use some battery power, but what it's ultimately doing is trying to retain that level of charge that's in the battery when you hit the button, and then when you get to the town on the other end, you can hit EV again and enjoy your guilt-free motoring to your destination. I have to say, all 3 modes are really nicely executed, and there's no overt, you are using the battery now, or you are using the combustion engine right now. You just sort of get in and carry on using it like a regular Velar. When it comes to plugging this Velar in, a 32 kilowatt fast charge will get you from 0 to 80% in just 30 minutes. A more standard 7 kilowatt home charger will do the same in 1 hour and 40 minutes. The idea being that if you plug the car in every night just like your mobile phone, you start every day on a full charge and maximise your EV range. Now, fuel economy in plug-in hybrids is always a big point of contention because it ultimately comes down to how you use the thing. If you're just using the petrol engine, you're going to get nowhere near the 130 mpg that Range Rover claim. However, if you plug in every day and do a sensible amount of electrified driving, you should get reasonably close. Either way, you should see an efficiency bonus certainly around town when you're using pure EV mode, so long as you're plugging in over its pure combustion equivalents. Likewise with its 49 grams per kilometre CO2 rating. Some critics will say that the Velar is something of a compromise between a Range Rover Evoque and the Range Rover Sport, but I don't necessarily think that. When you think about how people actually use their Range Rovers, i.e. predominantly on the road, I think the Velar's road bias gives it a distinct advantage over its siblings. I really despise being sat in a traffic jam, so now might be the perfect opportunity to see whether this Range Rover is really a Range Rover. Now, just because this P400e has a substantial electrical component to its drivetrain, don't go thinking that Range Rover have passed up on their traditional off-roading abilities, because it hasn't. Okay, it does sacrifice some ground clearance and, I suppose, adaptability by not having air suspension, but that doesn't really stop it going from where it needs to go. This off-roading trail is by no means the most taxing thing a Land Rover product has ever seen, but it's probably more than what the average Velar will ever see. Now, just like many Range Rovers, this one is equipped with terrain response too, which is a really intelligent system that works out what surface it's on. Now, we're going through some pretty sludgy muds and ruts here, and thankfully there is a dedicated muds and ruts setting which I've selected via the double screen at the bottom here. And what the all-wheel drive system is going to do is intelligently work out where power needs to go, and also it activates a hill descent mode, meaning that the car won't run away with itself as we go down steep declines. Now, this particular route isn't all that tough for this Range Rover. It is capable of a lot more than what we're going to show you today, but should the going get tough, there is some clever tech on board to help you out. This Range Rover has a wade depth sensor, which means it knows how deep the water it's driving through is, and it will let you know should things start to get too deep. And then there's also a series of all-terrain cameras, which give you view down onto the wheels, down by the side of the car, or most helpfully, off the nose of the car when all you can see is bonnet and sky. In short, it should make sure that your shiny, unblemished Range Rover stays an unblemished Range Rover. I mean, this is a really steep hill, and it's just finding traction in this mud really well, I have to say. I mean, many other vehicles, even ones with some off-road pretenses, will be sliding backwards down this right now. The all-terrain system is really good at just digging in and finding grip and sending power to exactly where it needs to go to make sure you just keep on making progress. But something this Velar can do that no other Velar can at the moment is rove in EV mode. I mean, you can off-road on pure battery power alone. It means that you're just being that bit kinder to Mother Nature. Or, well, I guess unless you do something stupid like crash into a tree, that's not so kind to Mother Nature. It's actually quite an unusual sensation quietly creeping along these off-road tracks, because you can actually hear how the vehicle's interacting with the world around it much more. Usually you'd be hearing the engine at work, particularly if it's diesel. But in this scenario, just hearing a lot of slopping of mud and just how the tyres are gripping and slipping. It's very different. The new Range Rover Velar plug-in hybrid starts from £56,500, and whilst that's the same premium price tag we've come to expect from Range Rovers, it is a premium over its siblings. However, if you're looking to buy this car as a company car, the benefit in kind incentive is certainly there to be had. For more on this Range Rover or any other 4x4 of your choosing, be sure to check out YesAuto.
Head to YesAuto.com for the latest car news and reviews, and don't forget to check us out on social media. We're in all the usual places such as Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Simply search for YesAuto.